Welcome to Blade HQ, everybody. It's time for me to make a confession. I'm a giant nerd.
Not raising a nerd, bro.
If it's a nerd, I'm gonna bash his head in.
And when I talk about knives, I'm often guilty of getting into the weeds of edge scratch patterns and carbide volumes as though everyone else is as nerdy as I am. My friends, this ought not so to be. So today I'm bringing it back to the basics and giving you an introduction to knives. Let's do this thing. In its most basic form, a knife is simply a handle with a blade which has a sharp edge and is designed to cut things. The primary job of every knife is to cut, but what you will be cutting, where you are when you will need to cut it, and how you plan to cut it will all have an effect on which knife you should choose for the job at hand. That is why there is no such thing as a perfect knife. Every feature, every material, and every nuance in a knife offers trade-offs that must be carefully considered, as every knife is made with a different cutting job in mind. As a result, every knife is a little bit different. And when knife nerds like me start talking knifeese, we are discussing these little differences that take a bit of practice to catch. When I show other knife nerds my knife collection, they immediately jump into the weeds with me. And we start talking about grind angles, blade steels, and all kinds of other nerdy stuff. When I show my dad my knife collection, he says, "Son, all your knives look the same." And to him, they probably do. But to me, they are as diverse as the human race. I'm going to show you how. Now at this point, I warn you, if you watch any further, you will embark on the never-ending quest for the best knife for every possible situation. And that quest is both long and expensive. But if you're willing to take up the quest, you should know that first and foremost, thickness affects your knife's cutting performance more than anything else. When I was first getting into knives, I wanted something that I could do anything to, abuse even, and it would still keep on cutting. Reliability was prized above all else, so I picked this Schrade SCHF9, which is almost a 1/4 inch thick. Then I was surprised when it wouldn't slice an apple as nicely as a kitchen knife would. Why didn't it work? Because of simple physics. No matter how sharp my edge was, I still had to force a 1/4 inch thick piece of steel between it. If I wanted cutting performance, I needed a thinner knife. But what do you think would happen if you took this thin chef's knife and tried to split a piece of knotty firewood? That blade is so thin that putting that kind of pressure on it would just make it snap. Sure, a thinner knife will cut through stuff much more easily, but it trades off its durability. For your job at hand, you need to pick a knife with the right thickness. But no matter how thick your knife is, it won't cut anything if it doesn't have an edge. To make an edge, your knife needs to get from the thick spine, the thickest part of the spine, all the way to the microscopically thin edge. That's where something called a grind comes in. The grind is that taper from the thick spine to the thin edge, and we call it a grind because it is done on a grinder. We're going to show you some graphics in a moment, and what you're looking at is a cross-section of a knife, as if I just cut the knife in half and you're looking at it from this angle. There are 5 grinds that are the most common, and the first is the flat grind. This is just a straight taper without curvature. These grinds give you a reasonably thin edge with plenty of metal behind it to keep it strong. Flat grinds are by far the most common, mostly because they're easy for knife makers. There are 2 subcategories of the flat grind, being the full flat grind, which starts from the spine, and the so-called saber grind, which starts from somewhere in the middle. I usually just call the saber grind the flat grind because actual sabers use our next grind, the hollow grind. This grind is done against a wheel, and it has an inward curve creating a hollow in the blade. Hollow grinds give you a very thin edge, but they rapidly taper to the thick blade stock. Hollow grinds take skill to do right, and when they are deep, they are some of the most beautiful grinds to look at. You tend to see hollow grinds on high-end knives and on straight razors. Hollow grinds do have very thin edges, so be careful when using them as they can get chippy. The exact opposite of the hollow grind is the convex grind, which has an outward curve. This is one of the most difficult grinds to execute properly, so they are mostly reserved for luxury, boutique, and small batch knives. The convex grind has a lot of meat behind the edge, giving it extra stability, and thanks to some geometry and physics that is beyond the scopes of this video, these grinds are some of the sliciest. You can see convex grinds on high-end bushcraft knives, camping and survival knives, as well as on ultra-luxury Japanese kitchen knives. Next up is the Scandi grind, which isn't quite like the other grinds. Instead of a big taper followed by an edge bevel, the Scandi grind is just an edge bevel ground straight onto the full thickness of the blade stock. There is no better grind for carving wood, which is why you see Scandi grinds on carving, whittling, and bushcraft knives. They're also very easy to sharpen. Scandi grinds have the thickest possible edge for a knife, so they're not great for making thin slices, but they are strong, dependable, and great for the woods. Lastly is the chisel grind, which is where the blade is only ground on one side. This is effectively half of a blade and gives you a paper-thin edge that cuts like no other. Because of their asymmetry, chisel grinds favor a dominant hand. Some custom kitchen knives have them, but they will specify if they are for a right or a left-handed chef. Also, chisel grinds are common on tactical knives because they leave an asymmetrical wound cavity. I'll just leave it at that. So we've talked about thickness, we've talked about grind, now let's talk about steel. Not all steels are created equally. Blade steels are measured in 3 areas: toughness, or resistance to breakage, edge retention, or how long it stays sharp, and corrosion resistance, or how well it resists rust. Most blade steels offer a balance of these traits tailored to a specific knife case. The reason there are so many blade steels is that no blade steel offers top marks in every category. There are always trade-offs, and this is nowhere more evident than in steel. I won't get too deep into blade steels because this is an infinitely deep rabbit hole, and also because we made an entire video about them, which you can watch right here. The last aspect of a blade I want to talk about is blade shapes. As with everything on a knife, each has its pros and cons. The most common blade shape is the drop point, a blade shape with an ever so slight drop in the spine toward the tip. These are great all-around users, and this is my favorite blade shape. The spear point is kind of like it, except the spine tapers all the way to the center of the blade. These pierce the easiest and deepest of any blade shapes, so they're very common on tactical knives. Another common tactical blade shape is the tanto, characterized by its 2 points. These have the strongest tips of any knives, so they're great for extrication, breaching, and all kinds of other tasks people way tougher than me do. The standard blade has a perfectly straight spine and a deep belly or curve for slicing. You often see these standard blades on German-style kitchen knives. The clip point blade is kind of like a drop point, except instead of a gradual curve in the spine, it is as if somebody just clipped the tip off near the tip. Clip points have a thin and needle-like tip, but otherwise function much like a drop point. There are many other blade styles, but we can talk about them another day. So now that we have our blades squared away, let's talk about handles. And people speak of handles much differently than the way they speak of blades. When we talk about blades, we talk about grind angles, steel alloys, sharpening grits, and all kinds of other scientific, data-driven attributes, so we can make the perfect Pareto-optimized blade. But when we talk about handles, it's all about what looks nice, what matches our everyday carry loadout, and what is comfortable in the hand, what color we like, and a million other subjective traits so that we can find the handle that brings us the most joy. Nobody is concerned with what handle material is objectively the best, but everybody has a handle material that is their personal favorite. And my personal favorite is G10. This material is a laminate of fiberglass and resin, and it creates a hard, stiff material that is impervious to the elements. It's also super light and comes in a million different colors. Similar to this is micarta, which is a laminate of fabric and resin. Micarta feels soft, warm, and clothy, and is very comfortable in the hand. It also absorbs water and oils from your hands, so it darkens and patinas with time. The last of the laminates is carbon fiber, which is layered of pure carbon fiber woven together and hardened in resin. This is incredibly strong and light, but it's mostly used in knives because it looks cool. To that end, many carbon fibers have layers of colored resin or metal foils, marbled textures, and more just to look cool. Lots of knives will use metal handles like steel, titanium, and aluminum. These are heavy, but they're also strong enough to withstand some serious abuse. Wood isn't as common as it once was, but some people still love it for its old school charm. The traditional knife community also loves bone for the same reason. Every handle material I've mentioned here will make a proper knife. The only reason to pick one over another is preference. Now that we have a blade and a handle, we need a way to protect that edge from the world, or to protect the world from that edge. Here you have 2 options, a knife that folds into a handle, or a sheath. The most common way to protect a knife's edge is by folding. Folding knives, or pocket knives, are by far the most common knives sold at BladeHQ.com, and for good reason. They're not opened by springs or anything, so they're just legal almost everywhere. They're simple, they're convenient, they come in every shape and size you can imagine. When you get a folding knife, you also pick a locking and opening mechanism, of which there are more than I have time to describe in this video. Automatic knives operate much like folding knives, but they open automatically at the press of a button. If you're familiar with folders and need something fast and one-hand operable, and are legally allowed to own one, an automatic knife is a great choice for you. Out the front knives, or OTFs, are like automatic knives, except instead of swinging out the side, they shoot out the front of the handle. OTFs offer unparalleled cool factor, but like automatics, they are often regulated. Butterfly knives, often known as balisongs, have two handles and a blade in between. They have their roots in Filipino martial arts, but in recent decades, the balisong community has waxed less martial and more arts, as balisong clippers continue to push the boundaries of what tricks can be done and to use the knife as a means to express their individuality. But as with autos and OTFs, balisongs are often regulated. Knife laws are complicated, and they range from outright knife bans in some places to no regulation at all in others. We made an entire video about knife laws with Doug Ritter from Knife Rights, and you can check it out right here if you want to learn more. But not all knives fold. Knives that don't fold, called fixed blades, need a sheath to protect the edge. Leather sheaths are the most traditional, and they do a good job of protecting the knife, but they don't like water or extreme cold, and they don't hold onto the knife as tight as some other sheaths might. If you want to carry your knife upside down or sideways, a hard plastic sheath will hold the knife in any orientation and is impervious to water. They don't like heat though. I've seen Kydex sheaths delaminated on dashboards in the hot sun. Canvas sheaths don't care about water, heat, or anything else, but they need a strap to secure the knife in place. These often offer extra storage for fire starters or sharpeners, and sometimes have straps to secure them to PALS webbing on the backpacks and vests. So, now we've talked about blade thickness, grind, steels, we've talked about handle materials, we've talked about knife types, and now you're ready to jump into the wide world of knives. There is much I haven't talked about in this video. Like I said earlier, though knives are a simple concept, they are infinitely diverse. If you want to learn more about knives in general, subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out over at bladehq.com. Yes, we sell all kinds of knives there, but we also have a deep repository of knife knowledge in our Knife Life blog. If you have any knife-related questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.